One moment here.
That's still
Sherry,
loud.
I apologize. You may need to push that button on that screen.
That's all right. Hold on 1 minute. I gotta admit, everybody. Hold on 1 second.
I'll help you with that.
I've got it. Can you lower the sound a little bit, please?
Yep.
All right, we're got it. Seth, we're covered.
Okay, thank you.
They're here.
All right, good evening. Thank you to the Scituate Planning Board. Thursday, June 22nd, 2023, meeting held at the Select Hearing Board room at Town Hall. It is on computer, it will be on Facebook tomorrow, yada, 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 we've done this forever. We've got a posted agenda, is it a second? Favor. So at 6:30 p.m., we have a continued public hearing, a site plan administrator review, special permit, small cell attachment. So I'm gonna run this meeting kind of like we did the last time. We're gonna hear from the applicant, then we're gonna hear from the board, and then we're gonna hear from the public. Town council is here tonight. Again, we're gonna have the same situation that we had the last time. Everybody, mind their manners, do not speak over each other. So would you like to introduce yourself and we get on the?
Patty.
Oh, sorry. Oh, remarks from 622. So we have received numerous comments on the small cell projects, 46 against 46 plus and 1 for. In addition, a brief in opposition was submitted at 4:25 p.m. this afternoon. That has not been reviewed by council in any matters not submitted a week in advance will not be considered during this particular meeting. The comments that we generally have received are generally related to, number 1, uncertain health impacts and concerns. Number 2, global and world concerns about FCC guidelines. Number 3, unsightly equipment. Number 4, a decrease in property values. Number 5, no clear or proven justification for the need for the antennas. Number 6 is unsightliness. Number 7 is there is already one on Allen Place. Number 8, is that right? Proximity to children's bedrooms. 9, a lack of an overall plan. 10, replacement poles have already been installed. 11, alternate locations need vetting. 12, the views are impacted. 13, other communities have adjusted their zoning to limit 5G small cell sites. Number 14, I think financial and emotional impacts severely. 50 towns should set restrictions, and last but not least, it is not in compliance with section 770.1 of the zoning bylaw. These comments have been forwarded to all of us on the board and the applicant, except the one that came in today. Some of the comments relate to zoning, and the town does have zoning in place in section 17.04 for the Wireless Communication Act antennas on utility poles. A major site plan review is required, which is what these hearings are for. The current zoning may not be what the public wants the zoning to be, however, it is what the town has in place for these particular hearings. We will ask the applicant tonight to address the 1996 Federal Telecommunications Act that prohibits state and local governments from regulating a personal wireless service facility because of perceived health effects for radio frequency emissions that comply with FCC regulations. And we have been told that these projects comply with the FCC regulations. At the last meeting, we asked the applicant to address the coverage and alternatives to show that the locations are the only feasible alternative. Additional coverage maps have been submitted for different alternatives. This hearing will be conducted with the applicant providing a presentation, then the board, and then the general public. So thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you for the record. My name is Edward Parry. It's P-A-R-E. I'm an attorney of Brown Rutherford, representing AT&T. Sitting to my left is the infamous Kevin Brewer from the last meeting, who I promised we would bring here this evening. We also have Don Hayes up on the remote, and Vincent Paquette is the site acquisition agent from Centerline, which you've probably seen in some of our platforms. So let me start off with the Telecommunications Act of 1996 and the relationship to emissions and regulatory standards. Madam Chair, as you noted, we have provided evidence that these small cell facilities will comply with the FCC standards. As I said at the last hearing, The FCC is the exclusive regulator. They set the limits, they determine the limits. We can all have opinions about the limits, but the bottom line is we have to show we comply. These are low power installations, and we did file a report that demonstrates that at worst case scenario, we will comply in a matter of multitudes. So the 1996 Act, which is a federal law, preempts state and local government from asserting jurisdiction over emissions and setting different standards, whether higher or lower. We may like that, we may not like it, but federal law prevails. I've read every one of the comments. I received a rather large packet. I will note that there was I'm told there was a brief or some kind of filing.
I am the only person that has possession of this, and it is right here.
I have not seen it, so I can't address anything in it. I haven't had an opportunity to review it. I'm sure once I receive it, we'll have some comments. But the vast majority of the comments that I have viewed from the public comments relate to health. And just to be frank, this board just doesn't have jurisdiction over that matter. So the federal law is very clear that the board cannot deny these based on the emissions or perceived health effects, so long as we satisfy the FCC standards. I think the other issue that's been raised is with respect to the equipment on the pole. So just to remind everybody, we're talking about a 24-inch antenna on the top of the utility pole. Now, I will admit that the cabinet can look a little large, against the pole. What AT&T is willing to do to address that is we'll remove the radios that are inside the cabinet, and we can attach them directly to the pole. So they're much smaller, but because we have them together in an equipment cabinet, the equipment cabinet gets larger. As I said, there are no fans in the cabinet, so it's just passively cooled. And it does provide additional space for additional radios in the future. But in some historic districts and where there is some sensitivity, while not the preferred design, we are willing to redesign to attach those radios directly to the pole. So it takes down the profile a bit. Nothing we can do about the antenna. As I said, 2 inches, 24 inches up on the top of the pole. If that's something that the board would like us to consider, if that helps with the design, we'll redo our plans. I anticipate with a filing of 40 some odd pages that we may not get through this evening, and we understand that. If we can have a discussion about whether we should revise our plans to include that redesign and provide some photo simulations accordingly. I did send a letter by noon on the 15th as instructed, which I think addressed some of the issues we discussed all of the issues we discussed last time. I'm gonna have Kevin do a brief presentation. I know Richard had some particular questions for Kevin. I'll let Kevin kind of give the inside baseball view of how he designs the network, what he looks for, et cetera, and then we can talk about the alternative sites. I do have some news as to what AT&T is looking to consider. It's going to be, some people will be happy with it, I'm sure some won't, but I'll let Kevin take it from here, and we can Kevin can either answer questions. I'm happy to answer questions now about what I've had to say. Kevin can do his brief presentation and interact if that's helpful to the board. I think the vast majority of the time would be on these alternatives, then we can run through the coverage maps. With that, I'll introduce Kevin.
Yes, Karen.
I just have one question about the cabinet. Is the cabinet going to be similar in size to the one that was used by the same design engineer in Watertown at 32 inches?
Give me 1 second.
Same design engineer, Derek Crease, and the same center line, designed one in Watertown that was only 32 inches tall.
I don't know of the one in Watertown, but our plans, I believe we're using a 50-inch cabinet.
Right, you said you were gonna redesign it.
Well, we're gonna take the equipment out of the equipment cabinet altogether, there won't be a cabinet.
There won't be a cabinet.
The radio should just be attached.
Okay, no cabinet.
So I had some difficulty getting logged in here, so as Kevin's speaking, I'll be able to, we just got photo sims in today, I haven't reviewed them yet, so I don't wanna present them. But if they're clean and I can show them, you'll see what I'm talking about. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin Brewer, he can explain what he does for AT&T.
My name is Kevin Brewer, BRE. I'm an engineer for AT&T. I've worked there for 7 years, designing both macro sites, which are big towers, across all the New England states. And for the last half dozen years, I've been doing small cells almost exclusively. The design process for a small cell is usually one in which we have usually three varieties. One in which we have a capacity concern, in which a macro site would actually cause more problems, or it's so close to the existing macro sites that it would be problematic and too much of a solution for a relatively small problem. Small cells would go in that area to immediately serve the traffic that's in that area, which would offload the macro network to a great degree. So that's one scenario. Other scenario is where we have small coverage holes where a macro cell is just too much to get it done. So let's say we had a half-mile stretch, quarter-mile stretch, putting a full macro site in there would be just too much of a solution. And quite expensive to do that for such a small area. And then the third category is where we have a macro site that we wanted to try to do. However, there were problems getting either a lease or zoning or something like that. So we had to fall back to a solution, not the ideal one, but one that we could get done and provide some relief to the network. In Scituate, it's kind of a combination of the two. We did have a search ring that was along Front Street that the feeling was that it would not be a good result trying to zone the macro site. So we've decided to look at a couple of small cells to hit some of the low signal areas where we had some complaints from public safety. And that's how we got to it.
So what made you decide on Allen Place and Bay Ridge Road?
So looking at our we looked at where traffic was coming from, we looked at our current quality of the network, we looked at signal strength, and so using that, we were able to determine where we needed to focus on. I then did a search along both Front Street, and every pole that I saw was heavily loaded where in our experience, we weren't able to attach to. Looked on the ocean side of Front Street, behind the first row of buildings, and everything looked to be private and not usable. So we started moving up the hill. Same situation on Jericho, where there was very few options, and so we had to start moving up the hill to find a suitable pole.
So it's the for optimizing coverage over a certain area. I mean, you could put it on a different point, but the up the hill a little bit would optimize the amount of coverage for one single small cell location.
So hills play an interesting role. Sometimes they work in your favor, sometimes they don't. With a small cell, if it gets too far out, the signal becomes unusable, but it acts as interference for a macro cell. So you do have to kind of figure out a point where you can maximize coverage and minimize the interference. And that's kind of where we on Bayview, we didn't go all the way up to the peak because we would have started losing some coverage as we start going down towards the ocean. So somewhere in the middle of the hill, we were able to find a pole that was usable. That's how we got there.
So, Mr. Burrow, can you clarify for me that only one utility per pole, so you cannot share a pole with Verizon, correct? I'm not entirely, what I've been told, and I think Vinny and Beckett could be able to answer that, but one of the you can only have one antenna on. And, but if we were to add our equipment onto a pole that had the same equipment that Verizon had, it would be rather a lot. So I don't think that would.
If we want a specific answer, Vin Paquette is on the call, and he deals with National Grid and locating the sites and licensing. Hey, Vin, are you on?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. So what Kevin said is absolutely true. So during the pole picking process, we're held to their engineering standards, whereas not every pole is available. And one of those particular standards are that only one antenna attachment per pole. So you cannot have multiple carriers on a single pole.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Whose rule is that? I'm sorry.
Whose rule is that, Mr. Paquette?
I'm sorry, say again?
Do we lose him?
No, he's a.
Exactly.
Hey, Vin, they have a follow-up.
Sure.
Do we mute him?
It'd be the power company, so I don't know if it's.
Yeah, so
National Grid.
National Grid.
we have National Grid. They have an engineering standard, it's 18.
Yeah, I know, the sound is too low. What happened?
Can you guys hear me?
Let's see.
I can count to 10 for you. You ready? 1, 2.
Here we go. We
3.
got it. I got
Yeah,
it. I
good.
got it. I got it.
Right there.
Okay.
Vincent, you're good.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So AT&T and National Grid have a master attachment agreement. As an exhibit to that attachment, there are engineering standards. So we're bound by those standards when we pick poles, and that standard is that one antenna or one wireless attachment per pole in that agreement.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So it's fair to say that's a self-imposed standard.
No, it's a pole owner's standard. Yeah. So National Grid being the pole owner, it's their standard that we need to abide by as an attacher.
Would you like to show us your coverage?
Yeah, so and then Kevin produced these, so I'm not gonna take credit for them, but.
Before we get to that,
Oh,
we're gonna look at these coverage things, but I wanna make sure I understand how you got to where you are. So you said you looked at the traffic, the signal strength, and the quality of the network. Those were the three criteria. So no other criteria in terms of making a decision. And then when you look at all those criteria, how do you weight them, and how do you factor what's good, bad, or different in all three of those cases to get to a selected location that we got to here?
So we have, a lot of internal metrics, a lot of internal tools that we use to understand what our customer experience is. So whether it be through drive testing, which we do a lot, we also have tools, many phones report back their conditions. So we know how phones are performing. And from that, we can determine where we have particular issues. We got some feedback from the FirstNet Authority that there were service here was underwhelming. And that was, one of the criteria that got us to focus on here. Kind of moved it up on the stack of things to do.
So, kind of performance testing in the general area and some kind of indication that service isn't as great as it should be. It sounds like that's what you're saying.
Yeah, but it's not just general, we get specific data into specific areas that show that we have to address some issues.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about this in particular. And here you said there wasn't a good location on Front Street for a macro site, so you decided to look at some small cells. And so when you did that, I guess what I'm asking is, how did you determine how many different locations you look at, what the factors are that determine that's the right location versus the wrong location? That's the best location.
Yeah.
Was there some kind of site analysis that had all those factors identified and that you went through?
So, our design process, once we come up with an area in which we need to address.
How big is this area?
Well,
Mile, 2 miles? How big is it? When you say come up with the area, how big is the area?
so, it depends what the area is, so.
Well, I'm talking this location.
Yeah, so here we had, I think we had 2 areas at about half mile each, that, we were looking at, and we're trying to maximize the coverage that we had in those 2 areas. So, looking through, knowing that it was gonna be a small cell that we could deploy here, we evaluated the poles, found one that would work. Reviewed the coverage, reviewed the quality that we would get from that, how it would impact other areas of the network, our macro sites that are in the area, and came up with a design for these.
So you had a couple of, I'm just trying to get this in my head, so you had a couple of half-mile areas. Somebody drives around, looks at poles, or, that's how you did it, drove around and looked at what the poles were?
So when I did the initial design or search range, right?
Yeah.
That's what we call, an area that we're gonna look into. I was sitting in Framingham and going through Google Earth and checking out what's available.
So
Found
a
out-
virtual drive-by, so to speak.
Right. So after, I come up with a desktop design for it, they get handed off to our site acquisition folks. And they go out and start evaluating the poles themselves. And then try to, come back and give me candidates that are usable. And I run them through and study their propagation characteristics and interference characteristics and kind of rank, each pole, each location as to its benefit or. Yeah. So, in the map that's shown here, so the yellow ones are the ones I was able to identify. Those were usable poles. And the red ones, unfortunately, are the ones that are not usable due to the requirements of the electric.
And is that red circle, is that the half-mile radius?
No, that's only, that's a couple hundred feet. I think it's 200 feet.
So where did you draw the half-mile radius?
So, well, the half mile radius is here, because we can't, these small cells only have a butt radius of about, well, at maximum, about a quarter mile. So,
Okay, so maybe, let me just tell you where I'm going and you can tell me how you got there. So you had a couple of half-mile radius areas that you identified as potential signal problems.
Mhm.
And then, so the question we have is, out of that entire half-mile radius, how many potential good locations were identified? And how did you rank what you would ultimately choose as this particular location? So I'm saying, was there a half mile worth of poles that you went through every one of them?
no, so it doesn't do, give me a second to try to articulate this.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense for how you got to where you are.
So we got to how this was a pole that I identified doing my initial Google Earth search. Ran the coverage from that spot because it was the nearest one to the area in which I could fill my objective, okay? So as these small cells have a very small coverage radius, some only go 1/10 of a mile, these ones can hit about a quarter mile. And over the water, they go a little bit further, but for the most part, the usable range is only a quarter mile. So if I start looking at the edge of where I have problems, I don't really cover much of what I need to. And so we try to stick towards the center, and work our way out until we find holes that are usable. And then we're able to rank them, and some of them work, some of them just don't. So these ones.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so on so these ones, we did have a few that were usable. And I think, we ended up on this one because it did give us a little bit of extra height. It would give us a little bit more, it would help us cover up to the hilltop without going over.
Can you tell me if this is Bay Ridge or Allen?
This is Bay Ridge.
What's the water? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
These are the maps that we provided last year, and we went through I did notice people looking at the previous one, we have since supplemented that and discussed those. But as the topic was up, I thought I'd bring up the maps.
Thank you.
So these are Jericho, these are the two we talked about. Along Jericho and our proposal here.
Okay, keep going. So you've identified, you pick a center somehow, right? The center of the half mile radius, is that what you do? And you pick out a pole.
In simple
and
terms,
say,
yeah.
I'm gonna put it here.
In simple terms, yeah, we kind of go for the center, but, we have to look at how the ground moves, right? Because that's gonna affect how the coverage goes. If the center happens to be, in a gully, we don't have, it won't be a good site. It would shrink it too much. So once a location is determined, that gets sent up for site acquisition, and we go in and construct the area for things that are usable. At a certain point, we get too far away from the search run, from the center, and it's, the site becomes unusable.
So it's in case you're looking for a specific location, you're not looking to say, well, if I need to cover the half mile range, I can put one here, one there, or I can do A, B, or C. It's just, I've identified the center, this is the closest pole, and that's how I kind of do it. Just trying to understand process,
Yeah.
that's all.
So when I do the initial design, I, look at the poles that I think are usable. And I pick the one that works best. And that I send out as the search center. Okay, and then, a couple hundred feet after that, it becomes like a different search ring altogether. We don't get, so if you move too far away, we don't get the cover of the objective.
I think basically you're looking for the center, you're looking for a pole to put on, that's where you start. Effectively, I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's what.
Yeah, I just, it's not like, I measure the distance and say this is the middle. It's not like that. It may end up being that, but that's not there's a method in trying to get the signal to where it needs to be. And sometimes it can be off center, sometimes it needs to be in the center to make sense.
But you have to start somewhere, so you start.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. And when you started this one, was this a 36-foot pole or a 40-foot pole?
So when I designed it, I think I designed it as a 37-foot pole.
As the existing, whatever the existing height was.
Yeah, it's hard to measure what Google Earth, vertical structures in Google Earth. But I know, what I'm looking for, and I know whether or not a 30-foot pole is going to cut it. 37 also allows us to get above rooftops in the room, so typically I like to ask for taller poles.
Brooke, may I ask you what would be a simplistic answer question, which is nobody likes these giant poles out here,
Right?
which is, we have a giant one out here, which has, I don't know how much out there.
So just,
These small, and I guess that's what the beauty is in the beholder, right? So, I think what I want to ask you is that all of these small cells that we're looking to put into our neighborhoods and into our environment in general, is to make sure that we don't have any more of these giant things, or as few as possible.
yeah, I think as few as possible.
He has to try to emulate on something, I do know that much. Or this, a little bit, maybe, no, I think so.
Yeah, so if we can. Yeah, so, you can kind of see that on the eastern side, there is a rather large gap where there aren't any cell sites, right?
By looking at the green or the brown?
That would be the orangey and the pinkish areas,
Okay,
kind of right where those blue dots are.
okay.
Right. So that's kind of where we're looking to fill in. So, would the most economical choice for Scituate or for AT&T in Scituate would be a macro site, kind of smack dab between all three of those on the eastern edge. But
Barker Tavern.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Yeah.
That would be truly lovely.
So your option is either small cells or like these.
yeah, that's the only tools we've got right now.
So as I supposed to talk about it before, I have 5 college degrees. I have not had a science course since 1972. So I'm a liberal arts major, you can tell, but I'm a librarian, so I've done a ton of research on small cell radiation and FCC. I've been doing nothing but this for 2 weeks. So just so everybody is assured that we take everything that is said very, very seriously. So, okay, thank you.
So you're gonna walk us through, this, I'm looking at this picture, and it's a pretty picture, but what does it mean?
So can I just
Why is it green or?
ask
Well, I think the physics major is gonna tell us.
So if I'm wrong, correct me, but what you're trying to do, I guess, is the impetus behind this is to tie in this area, which has a lot of population, but not a lot of coverage. So the FirstNet thinking behind it is to increase coverage here so you can tie in to the larger or the large towers, or at least have coverage in that dead space between the
Yes.
large towers.
So that is one of the benefits of small cells, because we've got, so serving from a distance increases a lot of interference into the network. It also takes a lot of capacity because you are getting interfered with by additional things, and the amount of signal strength from the phone needed to talk back to the cell or to get your data from the cell cleanly, it takes a lot of capacity from the macro network. So by putting small cells in areas where there are traffic that is being served, although poorly, you add a tremendous amount of capacity to the other areas of the network that you're not touching. So it's kind of like having a cake and eating two in a way, where not only do the users in the immediate area of the small cell benefit, but the users that are off the macro network also benefit.
So I would like to make a little analogy for anybody who's been here for a long time. As a younger person, I lived on Tilden Road. At that time, Radio Free Europe was what is now Toll Brothers. Between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock, we had no radio reception because they were broadcasting to Portugal or to Russia. My mother thought she was totally out of her mind. It came through our shower, and it came through the oven. So I understood when you talk about that interference. It didn't matter how often we complained, they just said that that's what we do for 3 hours a day and go do something else while you're doing that. So I understand that interference. Do you remember that here?
Yes, it came through our television set.
Yeah. So I totally, I kind of get this analogy.
So can we get back to this
Yeah.
for just a second? There's multiple colors here, 3 of which say high connectivity, right?
Right.
Which includes the orange, includes the blue, includes the green. So what are we to take away from this picture?
So this kind of, it shows where a user would be expected to get certain types of service, right? So there are a few areas in which the connectivity would be rather poor, and you may or may not get it. And I think those are in the low-lying areas.
Would those be what you call marginal connectivity?
Those would be poor, they would be in the gray.
So the gray, okay.
So the next one is you're more than likely going to get service, but like if you were trying to stream something or load a web page, it may not come up particularly quick. Might just pause for a bit. So, but you're still connected. It's just that there's, you're so far away from the serving cell, and you're getting interfered with a little bit that it's taken a very long time to, your data rates are very slow. As you go up to the orange, you're almost guaranteed a connection, but, your data speeds might be slow. They might work fine depending on what the usage is like. And as you go up to the blue and greens, those are pretty good. You wouldn't have any real issues. Actually, the orange too, you wouldn't really notice much.
Just for the record, what you did ask us last hearing to produce this townwide map, so that's what you're looking at where.
No, I appreciate that. I'm trying to understand, that's.
And I'll have him fill in the details, but the macro sites that are the green dots, and then you get those blobs of coverage where we have good solid green coverage. But our chances of getting a tower down in Harbor are probably pretty slim to none, so.
You're right.
Go with that, you can fill in.
I'm just trying to understand what it is you're trying to demonstrate here, because, I think you're saying green is really good, but but it doesn't sound like you're saying blue is bad or even orange is bad.
That's correct. Yeah, they wouldn't cause much concern from us, because that, you know, the vast majority of users wouldn't notice any quality issues in this area. But once you start dipping into the orange, you know, lower edge of the orange and the pinks and the grays particularly, you're going to have some issues.
Okay, we can look at some more maps.
Yeah, what we did with the other maps that we provided was we haven't isolated the coverage for the Bay Ridge location. We'll deal with that one first, and you can ask, obviously, Kevin's here for technical questions, but you know, it was a little bit confusing last time, so we just isolated what are we getting from Bay Ridge, and then there were two along Jericho that, you know, had some potential. They were yellow pins, if you remember. This is the lower one there. Old Pier 54, the boat landing, which was referenced in the letter. So this is just the isolated coverage from if we put the small cell at that pole versus what would be, too many? What would be from Bay Ridge? Then we moved over to the yacht club. That was the other yellow pin on Jericho. And you know, you can see we get a little bit better coverage than the boat landing, but certainly not what we're getting from the node on Bay Ridge. Now with this particular location, you know, we acknowledge that there's quite a bit of neighborhood opposition, that we're getting some, you know, feedback from members of the board. So, you know, there were some questions about how close can we get for the coverage. So Kevin has taken a second look based on my summary of the proceedings, and we think we can do it with the site along Jericho, namely this site here near the yacht club, boat club parking. Yep. That gets us almost all the way, not quite, but you know, everything's a balance. And now the one thing I would warn is that based on the comments I've seen from the neighborhood and folks who appeared, we're just going to attract a different set of neighbors, and maybe all the same neighbors, but somebody is going to see it. So we are willing to take a look, see if National Grid will license this pole to us. We don't have carte blanche say, but we are willing to make an application to National Grid for the Jericho Road. For that Jericho road site, it's Scituate Harbor Yacht Club / boat club parking lot. If you take a look on Google Earth, you will see that it's a pretty standalone pole. It's got some wires on it, doesn't have transformers, not a major connection. For all the reasons that we listed on that alternative site analysis, this seems to pass muster. So if National Grid is not opposed to it, we'll try to get it licensed. Until that happens, we'll keep this application pending, because if we get rejected there, obviously we're giving up coverage. We would prefer to be up on Bay Ridge where proposed. It doesn't make sense for us or AT&T to invest in something that doesn't work or is not optimal. But on the other hand, we do understand that there are balances and compromises, and we're willing to give that a shot. We don't have quite as good a story on Allen Place. Give me 1 second. Okay. So if you recall, at the last hearing, we did a similar, site assessment map with the Allen Place node. We had cut off at the the eastern border of the search ring, and that red line. We were asked to take a look further down on Front Street, and again, in consultation with Kevin, we went a little bit further, try to get out even further, from front. Problem is that we have nothing that works. So we don't have, you'll see, we don't have any yellow pins, they're all red. Unfortunately, if we could find something in that area that we could attach to, we could do the same sort of thing that, we're willing to do at Bay Ridge. But they either have, and I will supply these, this was not ready for the deadline of last Thursday. I'll email these to the planning department either later tonight or tomorrow morning, so that everybody has them. But we've looked at all the poles along Front Street, including to the east, and none of them work. And I do have, you will see there are details, but I can tell you that they either have transformers, major electrical equipment, they are junction poles, or they're on private property. So, like I said, unfortunately, none work. So none feasible. They would work from an RF perspective, but not from a feasible. We can't get a license from National Grid like we think we'll be able to do at Bay Ridge, or at the Bay Ridge alternative on Jericho. The alternative for Jericho, on Jericho, if I could just jump back, is the pole right at the end of Bay Ridge. So it's kind of, Bay Ridge, it's Bay Ridge, right? Right at the end of Bay Ridge, so it's the intersection of Jericho and Bay Ridge on the water side. So I don't think it's in a direct path, and if we remove the equipment cabinet, we'll probably get, somewhat of a diminished look, but, I'm sure we'll have some butters here. I think we've kind of addressed what we talked about last time. I think we brought a good compromise, at least with Bay Ridge. We hope there would be support for the relocation of the pole, both from the planning board and from members of the public and the neighbors. I would ask that if that's a non-starter, tell me now so that we don't waste time and money trying to get National Grid to license something for us. They'll probably want to replace the pole because this is where they get the opportunity to replace their poles. I will say the poles are usually 40 feet, but 6 feet of area, so I want to be clear. This isn't a 40 foot pole to the top, it's 40 feet, 6 feet is sunk into the ground. That's why you get the 30-foot top height, then our antenna goes to 37. So I guess I would like to get a sense, not that we're looking at an approval, not that you're, I just want to make sure if using the thing along Jericho, it's just going to be a non-starter, fairness, tell us, and we'll continue our path because it would just be a waste of resources. On the Allen Place, we're stuck right now.
What are the orange, some not quite yellow, but orange dots on that map? In the harbor?
Right.
Oh, the orange, that's, I think that's Google Earth, it's restaurants, you see it, like in the form.
Okay, that has nothing to do with nuts, okay.
Nothing to do with that, it's just, that's how we find our restaurants.
Oh, so there's not one, there's no place in the harbor. What does red mean that you can't put it on there? Those are telephone poles, but they're not to be used.
Right, they're all existing poles. Some are not in the public right of way in this instance, but we identify those when you see the report. If it's a pole in a parking lot, we can't use it, it's private property. National Grid's not gonna let us use it, and we're not in the right of way. So all of these poles, except for those in the private property, exist and have a problem, either transformer, major electrical junction pole, and the Verizon pole is one of these, and we can't attach because it's existing.
Did you go down a little bit more west in the harbor, right? West, closer to, say, where the grocery store is?
Where's the grocery?
South, is that the south?
The south.
The other one. South.
Well, you see, at some point we're gonna start to lose, we're getting well outside.
Up where you want.
Our goal would be, the priority or the preference would be to be in that circle, somewhere towards the middle, obviously, but again, when we start getting too far out, then we're gonna start losing, the coverage objective going the other way.
So do you have a map that shows the two locations and shows the coverage? All together?
Which two locations?
Well, this one and Bay Ridge, 'cause you're trying to get
Jericho.
that,
Jericho.
well, Jericho, yeah, sorry.
You showed us that.
You have a combined map or is it just individual action. You got something?
Yeah, right. Right there?
No, I mean combined with the other, that's just
So we
one.
can see the
No,
total coverage
no.
from both of
Yeah,
them.
it's just one.
Yeah, no, if you,
We,
no,
I don't
no,
think we
no,
have
no.
this stuff.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, so this is,
Put it on
this
the
is,
ta- It's on the table.
I provided these last week.
There was stuff provided June 8th and there was stuff provided June 15th.
Right, this is what was last time.
Right, and there's-
And this shows, Bay Ridge and it shows,
Is there stuff that put them together?
No, this doesn't show, this shows, this is all, so this is from last week. This is alternative 2, which I refer to as the Reese letter, just to have a reference. So alternative 2 was the Scituate Harbor Yacht Club. With, okay,
It's Wellesley, but it's a Bay Ridge. Just a percent.
The street, when you said it's at the bottom of Bay Ridge, that pulls at the bottom of Wellesley and Jericho, that you're circled there. Just so people know what you're talking about. That one circle, that's not the bottom of Bay Ridge, it's the bottom of Wellesley.
you need magnifying glasses.
So that's,
Just because it,
it's at the yacht.
excuse me,
That one's at the yacht. Club. I think that is at the yacht club, so I think we're gonna end up being a little further south. Is Brookline south of Bay Ridge?
No, it should be.
Yes.
I think alternative 2 is referred to as the yacht club, but we can do a map with combined if for some reason that's necessary.
No, I think this is it, right? That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Wait, and
so the question would be then,
this is the kind of, this is the other location you're talking about, right?
it's alternate 2, right?
Correct.
So I'm gonna ask the elephant in the room, but are these the only 2 small cell towers that we would be installing in this particular area? Can you answer that?
You mean forever or right now?
Whatever right now.
So,
Was there-
right now, yes.
Yeah, I don't have any other design, for Scituate at the moment. But, once we go through a cycle of other towns in the area, we'll probably end up coming back at some point, years from now.
So can you go back to the site overview, I mean, town?
So many files open.
So you're sort of, you're covering along the waterfront area. So these other places where we see significant gaps, there's no plans for that. You don't have any, nobody's gonna show up next week with another filing for another filing kind of thing.
No,
You don't have any other coverage issues other than right there.
so we do have coverage issues, but we also have limited resources in which we can fix them. So, we get an allotment of sites, whether they be macro sites or whether they be small sites. So, at the moment, we do not have any further allotment that we could put into Scituate. And we do have, we have all New states to deal with, so there are lots of areas in which we can improve, so we have nothing further planned.
So this was a big enough issue somewhere, I'm not sure where or how, but it was a big enough issue somewhere that it usurped all these little locations, not only Scituate, but other locations as well.
Correct. And, Kevin mentioned, I mean, part of this was the town reached out to us. I mean, there was an inquiry made about coverage and the lack of it, probably for such public safety reasons along the beach areas I mentioned. So, you know, we get inquiries from people that I run into, people, you know, in public safety looking to improve signal. And they did, I mean, the town did reach out to us and say, you know, what are you looking at doing here? And I'll tell you, we get inquiries from time to time, especially along the Cape, where there just isn't any coverage for people. And it truly becomes a public safety issue. I mean, Wellfleet had huge issues. There's no coverage there.
And I can tell you that the one letter that we got in favor of this came from the fire department.
And just so, we're installing these everywhere across the country and, you know, throughout New England. So it's not, well, you know, why are we doing all these in Scituate? You know, I've done personally hundreds of these throughout, you know, eastern Massachusetts. You know, we're not doing a lot in western Mass unless the, you know, population's significant, but, you know, I've probably done, you know, in a highly populated area, we probably have 25 nodes in like a city area. Boston will have tons of them. But, you know, I know it's a different circumstance, but I've done these throughout the Cape from the, you know, first town all the way out to Provincetown, both at the beach and in the, you know, more densely populated areas. So this is not unique to Scituate. You just haven't dealt with it yet. Yes.
So there is there some, you guys can correct me, there's already some kind of small cell on Allen Street?
Yes, there is, it was approved in 2018.
And it's,
And it's
Yeah.
Verizon Wireless. It's a
Does
Verizon
those
Wireless.
have interference at all, those two?
Nope. So we operate at different license frequencies, so, you know, our equipment doesn't follow theirs doesn't follow ours. No separation between those frequencies. I mean, if we were right on top of each other, you know, just this, you know, we could
How far
overlap
apart,
the receivers. What's that?
how far apart are you from that?
I think we're like,
Few hundred feet.
yeah.
Probably, you know, one side of the road almost to the other side of the road, but
It's very
it's up,
close.
it's up the hill a little bit, so.
Very close.
I think Verizon's in this area, yeah.
Yeah, they're down in the bottom of the street.
It's like coming up from the park.
We should probably go into
And-
Mr. Clay, we're about to-
So we also, I mean, we also share tower space with, you know, with Verizon. Many locations, thousands of locations.
Yeah, that tower's shared space. I mean, that's got all the carriers on it.
I wish I owned that. So,
You do?
I read a list of what were the public perceptions for the 46+ letters that we got. This is a public hearing and we will listen to the public. We know this is very emotional, we know where most of the group in this room stands. We know that, I'm gonna say 100% against, and that's okay, but we're here to listen. If you have anything further besides what I read in your list, please feel free to contribute. We'll start with the room first, and then we'll go to Zoom. Ms. Ma'am, could you please identify yourself and give me your address, please?
Meg Garrison, 64 Sedgwick. I have a question about the yacht club location. I know that there's multiple parking lots in the yacht club, and I'm wondering if there are certain restrictions in terms of like how far these should be from children. I know that's why a lot of people don't live here in the first place. But I'm just curious how far it is from the actual, where all the kids are, because if it's right over.
So we have to tell you that while there could be,
I'm not saying, yeah.
excuse me, I didn't just speak to you. We have to work within the confines of our bylaw right now. We understand that we probably need to address this bylaw at some point. Right now, for this particular application, those what if we could, do not exist right now. We have to work within the confines of the bylaw that we have sitting right in front of us. So we don't have communication on that now. So therefore, we are not compelled, not that we are not sympathetic to that, but we have to operate within the limits of the law. Okay? Yeah,
And forgive me if this has already been covered, because I don't hear very well, but
your name and address, please, sir.
Mark Donnelly, Beacon Road, 18 Beacon Road. I saw the coverage maps and I really kind of understand them. What I didn't see was anything from the lighthouse in. Is there a reason for that? From the lighthouse in, there wouldn't be any absorption points.
I'm gonna let the
Things
engineer
like
answer
that.
that first, thank you, Mr. Burrow.
So we did run a location, a poll.
Can you hear that, sir? Can you
No, I
hear him?
really
Okay,
can't.
so-
I know that you're obligated to microphone.
That's okay.
So we did run a location, in the parking lot of the lighthouse. And that is shown there. So it's on the map.
That's from the lighthouse in?
Oh, I'm sorry, the lighthouse inn,
Yeah,
not the,
yeah, kind of, yeah. Is there any way you want to put one on Bay Ridge?
Mhm.
You've got 360-degree coverage. That's 360 from the lighthouse?
that is from the lighthouse, correct?
The lighthouse is on the peninsula there.
That's right, yes, yes, sir.
Takes them over the ocean.
Okay.
Is that the lighthouse there? Are we talking about the same thing?
It's not an
It's
inward,
Oh, we go inward.
not,
Do you
it's
start
not,
at the lighthouse and move in toward the center of the, not even per se. So it covers the Lighthouse Road and Rebecca Road. And that's about it. And that's all that's out there.
In the northern part of Jericho.
But no, they want to know if it covers the lighthouse, those two roads specifically. And then Joe. To the woman in the back.
For the record, Caroline Reese, you're familiar with me. I wanna say, I feel like there's almost a half solution, at least no one's gonna be ideal, but I applaud, I was a little depressed, but I applaud at the end that you looked at an alternate location that, you know, if your pole's in the center, about, 300 degrees of a 360-degree circle is parking lot, beach, and everything. And putting it across Bay Ridge in that alternate location, the right of way of Jericho is probably 50 feet. You're immediately 50 feet from the edge of a property line and then a house. I applaud that kind of investigation. So that's new. I just wish that Allen Street we could do the same, especially considering there's a small cell tower, I don't know, 50 feet, 100 yards away, you're gonna double that up and you think, I appreciate the thought put into that alternative, and I'm very happy to hear that. I just hope there's something at Allen where we can space them out. I think maybe Village Market, it was just off your map, but it's probably as close to that location as the harbor, a big parking lot, again, to get that couple hundred feet away, that Jericho location, that alternative is probably getting the yacht club the best.
So please remember that these people deal with the public right of way, the Village Marketplace is a private,
Or pole along there,
which they
where it
look
radiates
at is too far down to the south, they say, right?
Thank you.
So that's too far down. If you come down toward the church.
Yeah, if we get much farther south,
Yeah.
from from this map here,
you lose
it's,
that.
we start losing,
Can I just say, we're referring to a market, could you just give me the proper name, is it Village Market?
It's
Yeah, it's called
Village Market.
it's another block or two south of what you,
It's
no, it's actually a block south of what you're showing.
Right there.
exactly,
There it is.
that's Cole Parkway.
It's right there.
Yes, that's right here.
Literally touch it.
Oh, I see, oh, duh, alright.
So,
With the dot that says village.
so we're wondering if there's any poles on that street that goes up or near the Village Market, which is just less densely populated and doesn't already have another cell tower right there for the people living on Allen Street. So I know it's not ideal for you, but and they've already got one on their street, I think that's.
I did look at this area and I got kind of excited because I, I saw a structure that I thought we could use, but I think it's a crane. When I looked at it, so it's right at the B in Beale Street. So it must have been a crane and Google Earth came by, but it's not a pole. But I did investigate it.
Yes, Dr. Ayers.
So Kate Ayers, 15 Allen. Respectfully, I guess I'm unclear what the situation is with poles, because I did a little research and it seems like depending on where you are, they cost from like $2,000 to $6,000 to put in. So if that crane location was great and it's a public right of way, why can't a telephone pole be put there? I'm unclear why we're stuck with the existing poles, because they removed my existing light pole was not an ideal candidate for this, but AT&T had NSTAR remove it and put in an ideal pole. So that was fascinating by itself. So if they can do that, if there's a location that is less disruptive to the community and in a commercial space that ticks off certain things, why can't NSTAR or whatever be professional, whatever they are, be paid to put a pole where a pole fits? I guess I'm unclear about that, because I feel like the expense to the billion-dollar companies involved versus the loss of property value to my family. And I've talked to neighbors and they don't wanna be the radiation street in town. Cause I understand you guys are 2 of the 4 companies, so the other 4 are probably gonna use the same demographics as you. So isn't that neat? Come visit Radiation Walk in Allen Place. It's one of those beautiful streets. It's starting to look like Nantucket. Walk along and see all the cell towers. So I just think I'm so excited, and thank you AT&T for trying to be creative with the yacht club parking lot. But I don't think you can give up on Allen Place. And I think that if there's an ability to put in a pole on a site that's good, that's on a public access, why can't that happen? I do think it's an undue burden in a small neighborhood with lots of families who are investing in houses. If you drive up and down Allen Place, every house is being fixed up. Everybody's taking pride. There's flowers everywhere.
Okay, we get that point.
So,
So there's no place on Beale, which is that road that goes up their street, that's Beale Place, I do believe, right?
It is.
So there's no place on that street to put a pole. And I'm assuming on Front Street, there must be some kind of distance between the poles. So let us also remember that people do live on Front Street, that while that is a commercial area, it's a mixed-use area, and people do live there, they live all over the harbor. So we can't lose sight of moving it from one button to a better place to, we would have another set of neighbors coming to us, probably the same set of neighbors. So we have to take the engineer's word that they've done a study, we saw that they could do something on Bay Ridge, and what they're telling us is just stuff available on Allen.
That's correct.
Well, could you more directly answer the question about whether you could install?
Another pole.
Ben? Ben, you want?
Yep.
The question is whether National Grid will install a pole for us.
So National Grid or Verizon, who's the telecommunications, will install a pole for their use only. They will not install for a wireless attachment.
can Scituate install a pole? The poles aren't that expensive.
We do not own our poles. There are some towns that own all their poles, in Hingham, 2 examples. We do not own poles, nor does the town administrator wish to engage in talking about buying poles.
AT&T hasn't ever installed a pole.
AT&T? I mean, we attach the utility poles, National Grid owns them, or Verizon,
Never
or
gone,
Hingham Municipal Light Plant. We
you've
don't install,
never
we
gone
don't
a
install.
mile of installing a pole yourself.
Can I say never for the entire company? From my knowledge, no.
Yes, ma'am.
Anna Kay, I live on 18 Allen. So I've got 3 questions. The first is it possible to get a pin site for Beale Street so that we could actually see the location of the poles? Because right now it looks as if there's no poles. So I'd like to understand that. The second is what prohibits us from pursuing private pole, discussions with private pole owners if the location is better. And my third question is if we could take a look at the Scituate heat map again. And if we could zoom in on Allen Place so that we can get a better understanding. No, the town map.
The town wide one? I have so many open here, I'm sorry, just give me a second. This?
Yes, please. Could you zoom in on that, please, so that we could see where Allen Place is?
Oh. Yeah, that was.
Keep going, yeah. Okay, so if you could remind me what the color codes say, because it looks to me that those, where pole 5 is, which is I assume what Allen Place is, that is in an area that has some blue and some green, which are high connectivity, fair to excellent data, correct?
Yeah, so there are some blue areas in that, but the vast majority is orange, and particularly where you have a lot of users as you approach the water.
So the users are using a commercial district in Front Street, that's what you're talking about?
Users are using the phones everywhere,
Okay, and so.
where they live, where they work.
And remind me again what the orange stands for?
So it's high connectivity and medium to low data rates, I believe.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand if we have moderate, so high connectivity but moderate to low data rates, high connectivity with moderate data rates, and high connectivity with high data rates for the vast majority of the location around the 18 Allen pole. Can you explain to me what the demonstrated need is in that neighborhood?
Yeah, there's a sufficient amount of users in there, and that as you have a lot of users with poor connectivity, you end up having network quality issues where people don't get the service that they want because of the connectivity or the data rates are so low. So it takes a lot of resources to try to service somebody that's in a low signal strength area or one in which is impacted by interference. So by putting the cell here, we're able to take those users and give them a higher quality service, and that frees up the capacity for the macrocells as well.
Again, I'm wondering if we have connectivity.
Well, I guess I don't think this is vastly blue and green around this channel.
It's hard to tell. And maybe we could just leave it, Chair, that you would take a quick look at Beale Place, because we know that you'll be coming back.
I have a note to do so.
Okay, so, I mean, we can put that to rest, that you will right now, okay?
So do we have any other questions?
Bruce John Marsh, live on Allen Place. And I would like to challenge the notion of what an acceptable site is. I mean, against the location on Allen Place. But let's keep in mind that, well, you know, the best efforts of AT&T and the engineers, this is the optimal location, and it serves an optimal radius for an optimal cost. That's a starting point. Then we take that and we sort of look at some of the constraints, and the constraints are some of the ones that have been said here over the past couple of weeks. Personally, I'm really wondering what the reluctance is to go outside of public realm of National Grid. I think I'm guessing it's easy to deal with grid, there's a known master contract, there's FCC coverage for siting needs, et cetera, but cell locations are put on private property all the time. So why can't we find alternative solutions to cover the downtown area, which, you know, in keeping with what was tried
on Bears Road, like yacht club, boat ramp, community center, fish pier, harbor master shack, Cole Parkway, where we can locate some of these sites, keep a separation from residences, keep it in a transit commercial area, and still get the coverage. Might it take 2 or 3 sites? Sure, but let's not be intimidated by, the cost of this cell tower relative to what AT&T spends per year on capital. If it's not in the particular budget for Massachusetts, fine, maybe it'll be next year, maybe Jericho and, site 1 along the coastline is put here, then maybe next year in AT&T's, next capital campaign, the next one is put in. But, by talking about that now, we can find maybe the ones that are acceptable, maybe they're town-owned poles, why can't they be town-owned poles? Maybe they're private poles. Why can't it be, pay the private rent, make a 20-year lease agreement? I think there are alternative solutions here that the community can get behind and AT&T can get behind. And if that solution handles 75% of the coverage of this proposed Allen Place solution, great. If it's 50, great. The other 50 might be taken next year. I don't think there's I personally don't care that there's no service on Front Street, but.
Let's be very clear about that I know everybody in this room does not care if you have connectivity or not. However, this is not the whole town, and I'm sure that the people of Fortis are.
No, but what I offered was solutions that work with the community, so let's try and make a solution that works. And if it's not the optimal one, well, that was just a starting point. I'm a former engineer, we designed for the optimal solution, and then we start editing that design for all the constraints that come up. And I think there are other solutions here, for all of our solutions.
Well, there are infinite solutions. I mean, we can, put a 150-foot tower down in that area. That's not gonna happen. We're not gonna spend resources to complete 50% of the work. I mean, the goal is to optimize. We readily acknowledge that. I mean, these 2 sites satisfy Kevin's design and AT&T's design criteria. That's what we go with. We take, this is a balancing, as I said. We take comments into account. We're entitled to be, not only are we entitled to be in the right of way, the FCC is demanding that the carriers increase service, increase capacity. They issued an order in 2018, which is part of the reason we're here. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a statute which allows wireless carriers, specifically wireless carriers, to attach the poles, and National Grid has to allow us. I mean, there is a lot of friction between us and pole owners because we go in and we take up their space. That we, they don't have a right to say no, as long as make-ready work can be done and we're not interfering with their mode. The town can't deny us from a pole situation to attach if we're not inconveniencing, I think, the intermodal of the public. So, we can't put a pole in the middle of the street, but the FCC wants these things launched. They want small cells. They want that. The goal of the United States government is to get 5G going and to get ahead as a competitive model. And because some people prefer not to have it, that's not the policy of the United States. That's not what the carriers have engaged with the FCC to get licensed and deployed. So are we interested in doing something halfway? No, we're not interested in halfway. But as I said, there are balances. If we can all be satisfied, it will never happen. If we can all be satisfied, for the most part, great. But we just don't, at least right now, I have a note to get a look at Beal Place, identify the poles, see if, if they're red dots, yellow dots, and then Kevin get pins, and then Kevin can review those. But the idea that we would say, let's just throw something out there now because it pleases, that's not the policy of the United States. That's not what the FCC is asking us to do. And as I said, they went so far as to issue an order to say we can use the public right of ways. They cap the fees that we have to pay. They cap the fees on the towns. They cap application fees. I mean, it's a significant order. This is what the cost of the United States government is right now. Launch these sites.
I don't believe it's unilateral on the government's part, right? Like the local authorities still have the ability to review and require that you cite these in an appropriate way for that particular location.
If they're in the public right of way, but to tell us that we need to go to a private party and enter into a lease agreement, That's not part of the FCCR. So I would disagree if that's what he said.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying,
Well, the gentleman,
it's not ironclad, the government usurps everything here, right?
correct,
The federal government usurps the zoning and the bylaws of the town of Scituate.
if they conflict. So yeah, I would agree, I would say,
But we don't conflict. We don't conflict with what the government is saying.
well, if you don't
The
let us,
government has said that local authorities still have local authority.
they do, and that's why we're willing to take that into account and why we came back with Jericho.
Should be.
But if it prohibits us from providing service, yes, your bylaw, ordinances and rules will be preempted without question.
It's not prohibiting you from providing service.
Well, I would suggest that if you say on Allen Place that we can't use the only pole that's available, assuming nothing else works, you're prohibiting us from providing service, yes?
Assuming nothing else works.
What's that?
Assuming nothing else works.
So,
I've heard, I want to
in the
see-
public right of way.
I want to see if there's anybody else besides YouTube people that we heard from you. Sherry, is there anybody on Zoom that would like to speak with us?
You can ask. There was someone who had their hand raised earlier in the meeting. If you'd like to raise your hand again, if you're on Zoom, now would be the time. As we'll take public comment from the Zoom audience. I don't see any hands raised.
Yes, you have reported, that's what that is.
What do you,
On the upper left-hand screen.
it says, record? I don't see any, hands.
I just make a statement that in view of this many-page document that I brought here today, hold on a second. This will be continued because no one has had a chance to review any of this. As we spoke to the man who gave this to me, it was stamped here today. It needs to come in a full week before, so we have time to review. And based on that, we do have a motion, but I will hear from you, sir, and then we'll continue.
Mark Sander, 15 Big Ridge Road. I have a technical question, I guess. We have these red circles, which I think you said are about 400 yards or 100 yards from the center, right, of the lookout for your coverage. But when you zoom out of that and then you go to the affected coverage from that location, you look like you're going out a quarter mile or so swath, but it's not a full circle, if you will, of your coverage that gets improved by the specific cell. So I'm just curious, if we got a quarter mile circle, of which both of these locations, some large portion of it's going to be water area, I'm just curious to why outside the red circle is not also going to be able to accommodate a half mile circle of increased coverage.
If I heard you correctly, you're asking that if we move, say, 400 feet away, to the edge of a red circle, that our coverage would still have the same relative footprint.
I'm just saying it looks like nothing outside the red circle as a whole is really come into play. Just say magnify that by 4 times and then look at it, because that's still the reach, at least, of any direction of what the tower is per your map when you look at what you're improving the coverage on. So I'm gonna assume if I can reach 500 yards this way, if I move the pole 500 yards that way, I'd still reach the same area because it's going uphill and it's going, going down. And I'm only asking that because in a lot of these situations, there's other public right of ways, parking lots, or that I'm gonna assume has more than just what Front Street has, because I agree with you, driven down Front Street, almost every pole has a transistor on it or what have you, so I get that there's nothing there. But there are several other public parking lots or larger public spaces, not in our zone 1, if you will, by the waterways, which is our smallest amount of property that you have, and then in relation to the poles. So If you're in a different zone, it might be a half acre or acre lots where the house is already 300 yards away from the pole and not 20 feet. So that's why I'm asking these questions about, do we still get that coverage? Because we're reducing it from the macro center, right? Which you told us that when we have the cell, we increase power here, so now this might be able to reach out farther because this is lessening the load. So I'm just wondering how far out of these idealistic circles you look to see how it improves in the map. That's my question.
Okay, so every site is different. As, you know, elevation changes, you know, if we gain height in elevation or lose pole height or ground elevation, it changes the impact of the coverage. Additionally, depending on how the terrain runs away from the site, because these are really small, so every undulation of the surface could create little gullies in which the signal just kind of skips on past and doesn't fill in. So when we look at it, we kind of do an area and study the ground first. And then from there, try to find a location that we believe is going to work. Then we start running those propagation studies on it to see if it does what we think it will do. And how much of it gets, how much of the objective gets that. So, you know, so when we're working in neighborhoods too, you know, I do try to find spaces between houses. You know, but sometimes you don't have that option, you know. And if, you know, the next candidate's also in the neighborhood, you know, next meeting is just a bunch of different other faces.
And that's the only reason I asked, that's why I asked, just because of the public spaces. We do have a fair amount of public spaces, and my follow-up next would be helpful, I think, for the board and the community. If we could have a relational to the yellow dots to say, this affects 1,000 of your customers, and this one affects 900. You know, like what's the drop off of the ideal site that's within AT&T's, if you will, your plan as far as what you want to cover, right? Because I think that comes to play as well. If we find an alternative site, but it's also providing 85% of the coverage, is that good enough? And it meets the general community's safety concerns, views, et cetera. Thank you.
So we are not gonna hear from town council tonight until he reviews what it is that we have, unless there's something specific. As I said before, what you're looking for, I think the majority of people here is the bylaw that we do not have. We need to work within the confines of what we have as a bylaw. It certainly has opened our eyes that we have to address this bylaw, but again, it's been a while since it has been looked at. And unfortunately, this application is not gonna wait for a new bylaw. That's how that works. They tell us they only work in the right of way. A lot of what people think is public space is really private space, such as the village market, that is privately owned, such as in the back of the billboard, that's a privately owned parking lot. The Carnival Parkways, private, I have no idea, I can't remember. But with that in mind, do we have a motion for continuance?
Madam Chair, before you continue, I just have a couple of questions that have gone unanswered that I need some direction on. So number one was the design in removing the cabinet. I don't have plans yet, but I'm not waiting till August to bring the plans. If that's the preference, I prefer to know now. I do have some photo simulations that show the equipment. Do you remember there used to be a big cabinet with these are the radios were inside, so the cabinet was 50 inches long. This is not ours, by the way, that's existing. This would be AT&T's 2 radios and then the shut off and media box. Let's see if I can get one more view here. I just want to show you the example of what these look like. So rather than have the cabinet, the radials would actually be attached, they're about 15 inches wide. It would be attached directly to the pole so that our initial design is that cabinet 50 inches long, 30 inches wide. And I can try to find the old one. I would just tell you from a visibility perspective, when I've done these in historic districts and sensitive places on the Cape, this is the preferred, get rid of the cabinet, because it's bulky. Some people perceive it as bulky, so if that's, again, I'm not asking you for your approval, but if it's something we should do,
That's a way you should schedule.
good, so I'll produce plans accordingly. The other thing is Jericho, I just want, if that's a non-starter, then let us know now, we'll continue on our path forward. But if Jericho is something that the board would be interested in seeing, as I said, we're not withdrawing Bay Ridge, but it takes us time to survey and get a license. We'll talk to National Grid, we'll get our application filed. If we get the license in time, we'll probably submit it, for site plan review to the board. I don't know that we'll get that done in time for August, but I don't want to leave here and come in and say, we're not gonna do this.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I have Jericho, the Scituate Harbor Yacht Club,
Yes,
or is
that's
it the
big,
Pier
that's-
44?
No, it's further down.
Oh, okay.
But let's get, we need to get this straight because I think
Can you
we're.
point out
It's
on
ultimate true,
the, where
correct?
it's on that?
Near Scituate Harbor Yacht Club.
Yes.
Is that the
Ultimate
site?
true.
That's,
So between Wellesley and Brookline?
I think
It's over in there, yes.
So it's on poles along the sidewalk there, is that where it is?
On,
It's
Will you
on
be
the
able-
ocean side,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's on the boat side, it's on the boat side, right? With the
No,
sidewalk
but it's
is-
along the right of way, it's where
Yes,
the,
in the sidewalk.
So-
where the walkway, where the sidewalk is and all that, it's one of those poles.
Yeah, that's right, the poles are on the
Right.
yacht club.
Can you give me 1 second? I'll get a Google Earth up here. And we want to make sure that we're all talking about the same. Obviously, I searched this thing. Well, I'm not sharing anyway.
No. No, you're not, your analysis is Oh, there.
Seriously, I can't do this.
We need a 13-year-old.
I know. Should have brought my kids.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's Christmas.
All right, so where's the, what's Brookline?
So see where that red dot is?
This?
So that's swimming pool. Is the golf cart, right?
Yep.
That's
The
the,
yacht
that's
club.
the yacht club.
Yacht club,
That's the yacht club.
Yeah, they're facing south, northeast.
It's,
I think
That's for sure.
it's kind of closer to the lower Jericho Road label.
So come down more.
The lower-
Yeah.
Go the other way.
You can be north and south.
Well, you go backwards, so I can't.
yeah, the bottom's north.
Good point. Here we go.
Yes.
Now I've got my directions. Is everybody nauseous?
Yes.
Yes,
Working on it.
yeah, no, it's right around there. Yeah, you can actually see it. It's right next to the pen. You can see the shadow?
The red dot there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just a little
Very
bit.
across from Brookline.
I'm sorry to delay it.
All right, are you ready?
Give me one, I want to go to a street view here. Make everybody really nauseous.
Where's the shadow?
There's that shadow.
It's not that one that's been transformed.
All right.
That one right there.
That's the one?
I think that's the one that Jen said we could use.
So what street is that? Brookline is Brookline. So we believe it's the pole at the intersection of Jericho and Brookline. We'll modify it. Vin, do you know it? Vin, is that the pole we looked at? 24, pole 24?
I can't recall that.
This looks doable, so I'm thinking on the,
I move to continue the two public hearings for the small cell attachments
adjacent to 9 Bay Ridge Road and 15 Allen Place until August 10, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. and to continue the time for action filing with the town clerk until September 29, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you, people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perry, I know that this is going on.
You have a copy?
This is the one. Oh, let's get
Thank you guys for what you do every week or all the meetings, because I've been to 2 and so thank you for.
Could you close the doors? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, could we,
Oh, this is Mr. Friday.
could you read us, please, our town council?
Rebecca Lewis.
Hi there, how are you?
Ian Burbank.
Nice meeting you.
Bob,
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, welcome to the
First
chaos.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah. Sharon, Mr. Perry wants to know if you get a copy of this, I think we'll send it to you.
We'll send it to you on
I'll get it to, I'll get it to.
You said that.
This is.
I sent you part 1. I will get you part 1. Yes. It was
So big.
I will send you, I will get it all to you tomorrow.
What's the date?
Thank you very much. So as we move, along, I go with.
What's the extension?
Yes, I'm getting it.
All right, sorry. I tried to get out of everybody there.
Okay, we have old business, new business.
So it's
All right,
Excuse me, Mr. Perry.
and I'm supposed to
Just
just
tell me
see
that there was
it.
an opportunist.
What's that?
Opportunist, you know who this man is, this lawyer? You're not.
Is there a lawyer's name on it? I didn't see it. I haven't seen it. All right.
So, if you want to.
yes.
Okay. Everybody wants.
There she is.
Have a good night. Happy
Good
Fourth.
night, thank you.
Thank you.
I move to approve the meeting minutes for May 25th, 2023.
Do we, do you
Yes.
amend that? Thank you. All in favor?
I
Counting. I move to approve the requisition of $1,436.25. Parsley Witten Group for peer review services at 14 to 16 Old Country Way for $300 to Tech Inc. for peer review services for 556 First Parish Road for $2,091.25 to Parsley Witten Group for peer review services at Seaside and Scituate for $117.56 to WB Mason for office supplies for $223.75 to Karen Joseph for mileage reimbursement and $29.95 to Amazon for office supplies.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? So now we go to the executive meeting. So I listened to zoning, all of the houses that burn down and Wayne's Road all have been submitted to zoning to be rebuilt. They're all be on pilings, and they're all gonna be a little bit bigger,
Of course.
so, they were approved.
They're elevated.
They're all,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just concerning because I didn't even know the beach had a name, it's not something about the right of way, I was very confused. Where am I? So that's all been approved, so that's moving right along, I don't know when they're gonna get a building permit or whatever else, but they came in with this foot to get that done, that's for sure. I neglected to listen to conservation last night, sorry to say, I was worried about the second. Ian, can you tell me off the top of your head, how much money is in CPC for housekeeping?
Right now, the housing has something like $600,000 in it. As far as I know, but I can double check that. They get a certain amount every year. And, but they have to spend it.
They have to spend it.
And if it's all right with Rebecca, would you mind if I started going to the housing trust meetings? Would you mind? Or do that?
You need to go to someplace else for you.
No, it's not. I don't wanna be home.
What they did is that,
No, they meet once every, the third, Wednesday at, the library. So I don't mind. I would have gone last night, but I didn't. So, and I went to traffic rules on Tuesday. And there was, a group from disabilities, and they asked they asked that traffic rules make a recommendation to the selectmen to up the fine for parking for a non-handicapped person parking in a handicapped space from $100 to $300. So that seems to be the going thing, and although, there have only been 10 in the last however many years that they've actually ticketed people, so who's to say? And they're gonna put up little signs, I think. And then there was talk about Country Way, because there were people concerned from where you go around the corner onto Country Way from the Egypt Garage, and then people were speeding, well, they did a traffic study and people are not. So there's no point in changing the speed limit.
across the railroad tracks?
No. This is where,
Curtis comes out.
where Curtis comes out the crazy four corners, and you go up, okay. And then, they're going to rustle around down the archives, because they're sure that there's a study on Cudworth and how to fix that intersection. I mean, there've been studies about studies. That is a horrible intersection. And then finally, apparently, somebody who's new to town and lives on Curtis is very, very concerned about the speed limit and wants to buy his own sign that flashes whatever the speed is supposed to be. And the board decided, like, no, we don't want the public buying these things privately.
They have to follow the sign by law.
No, but at any rate,
They can have the 103 and it does not work.
well, there you go.
There's two of them that don't work. But you understand.
I asked because somebody had asked me, is there any possibility of lowering the speed limit from Van Hill, Van Lot down to the Cohasset line to 35 miles an hour? And they said,
Can we go take it down to 35 going down to Marshfield too from now?
and it was on 3A, and they said, no, it's a state road, and they are doing a traffic study, but as you just pointed out, the signs don't work. So there you have it, that's all I know, and I'm sticking to it.
What you tell it.
The sanctuary, the place right across from me has slowed down traffic on 3A down by Kennedy's quite a bit, actually, which is good.
Yeah.
So what is the speed limit there from Manlock?
50.
Yeah.
They have a car accident
I get them every single day.
Last month, whatever day it was.
But it's down
Friday.
to even 45.
It doesn't matter, but the issue is that when you come to the four-way stops at the two-way stops at Manlock and at Booth Hill, you're not supposed to be able to go out around the parameters to do the church.
And people do.
So invariably, I come out on Trinity Walk from the west end. This person stops. Person in back of them comes around, and if I go forward, I'm gonna hit them. Happens exactly on the other side. Actually, last week, I saw somebody take a left on Trinity Walk from 3A, and they went around the passenger side of the car. So, but I've never seen that before.
See a lot of things, and apparently that accident, they kept saying it was 5 cars, it was only 2. And it was somebody who came out of the gas station that slammed into a truck and they ended up in the woods.
Oh, I heard that one, okay. So I, that's what it is, it's really traffic. I think that big sign should say, 3A has the right of way. I think that's what that flashing sign at the police station should say. Oh, we don't have to take driving tests tonight, I guess.
Well, I think they got their licenses at Sears and they
So-
have this.
So that's, you know, so I hear that every single day, my doors are open, I hear those accidents from hotel and from here, so. Can't go to Sears anymore, get your license. Rebecca, did you hear something?
Not here.
This look like a new liaison, so Ms. Joseph, how about your town clerk report?
We remain very, very busy and, you know, the next meeting, we'll be having 817 Country Way again. And I think we're having 18 Drew as well. And, we remain very busy.
Our next
None of
meeting,
these days you can tell us that you're not busy, you just hang out.
Just walk around.
But it may be a few years from now.
We actually, today, we did have our kickoff meeting with our consultant for, the MBTA communities. And, she's going to be, I didn't have a chance to look at the information she sent me after the meeting, but since we're a little bit more advanced than some of her other clients, she's going to advance the zones, working on the zoning. We kind of told her some of our thoughts today, and we're going to be setting up more meetings this summer.
Who's the consultant?
It's Jennifer Goldson Associates.
Have we used it before?
No, this is we're getting this service through Mass Housing Partnership, so we don't.
Oh, we can't do that.
We don't have to, we're not paying for this consultant.
They're providing.
They're
resources.
providing this as a resource because of
That's cool.
compliance for the MBTA communities. So we're working on it and we actually may have to have a public hearing same night, August 10th as this one for one minor revision to the stormwater regulations. That's I'm working with town council on that as well.
when is our next meeting, the 18th of July?
No, the 7th, the 13th of July.
13th of July.
This is the 18th, is a special.
The 18th is a
Okay, gotcha,
special
gotcha,
meeting
Gotcha.
that will, as far as we know right now, it's going to be basically, we'll meet to continue.
But that is special.
Because things are up in the air
Right, okay,
with Mr. Tedeschi's death.
right, I know that, okay, thank you.
So, at that meeting, do you need me there?
We need 3 people, so I know I'll go and you'll go, so
I'll go.
between the 3 of you, you need to decide who's gonna go.
No testimony will be taken, and the intent is just to continue to try to find a date that
No,
they think
28th.
that may be appropriate.
So like I said, there just needs to be 3 of us there. And Bob, you're willing to come?
Yeah.
Okay, so the 3 of us are there. Rebecca, you come too.
Okay, if somebody can't come, reach out to me.
I will take past that.
Okay.
My sister.
Oh, okay. Is there anything else to cover today? If not,
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.